They say Illinois keeps its secrets under polite skies, soft cornfields, tidy suburbs, polite porch lights. But some corners of the state whisper back, if you listen, you'll find stories that won't let go. Here are 5 places Illinoisans point to with the same low voice they use for funerals and family recipes. The sort of stories you don't tell at lunch. Each one is a small geography of feeling. 1. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. There's a patch of woods in Cook County called Bachelor's Grove, a cemetery swallowed by trees and rumor. By day, the stones tilt beneath moss. By night, the place becomes a long, slow exhale. Locals say the cemetery doesn't so much haunt as remember, and it remembers people in motion. The stories are small, precise, and repeated with the accuracy of a recipe. People driving down the narrow lane tell of headlights finding a grave where no path leads, a car engine that dies in the middle of nowhere, and the sudden appearance of figures crossing the road in slow silhouette. Some visitors say they've watched glowing orbs lift off the ground and drift up through the oaks like disturbed moths. Others describe photographs taken at dusk that later include faces or lights that were nowhere in the scene during the shot. A few longtime neighbors insist the place is a mirror. It reflects whatever the living bring there. Grief, joke, curiosity, and it returns a quiet version of it. One woman who grew up near the grove remembers as a child a man who came at night to polish a headstone that never bore a family name, the way one polishes a brass door knocker out of habit. He said he came because the name deserves to be seen. No one in town claimed the stone. It sat, year after year, a small white rectangle beneath vines. In this way, the cemetery is oddly ordinary. People tend graves, they leave coins, they carry buckets of water. The strangeness is less theatrical and more domestic, a place where the living continue conversations with the absent. Bachelor's Grove doesn't scream. It invites you to remember. 2. Manteno State Hospital. Drive south toward Manteno and you'll find the hulking outline of what used to be the State Mental Hospital, a complex of red brick pavilions and long colonnades built when institutional care still meant isolation. The hospital closed years ago, but the stories haven't moved on. Locals speak of long corridors that hold an air like old books, dust and a sense of routine. Former staff and patients told tales of whispered names, of wheelchairs moving by themselves down empty halls, of a recurring scent of talcum or old soap that arrives without wind. A nurse on night duty, now an old woman who still cuts a figure in town, told her grandchildren about the patient who kept rewriting the same letter, page after page, addressed to a woman no one could find. He would fold the letter, tuck it into his shirt, and wander the wards until he fell asleep in the dining room. After the hospital shut, residents visiting to salvage bricks or memories say they found stacks of those folded letters in a locked drawer, the same handwriting, the same unending address. The Manteno stories aren't meant to frighten tourists. They're warnings about how institutions store memory. Buildings collect habits, the rhythm of staff rounds, the clack of rubber soles, the soft chime in the day room. When the people leave, the housework of those days tends to linger like a ghost of a schedule. Some who went in to photograph the empty rooms came out with trembling hands and a respect that felt like apology. Manteno's oddness is civic and somber, a monument to the way we cared and the way we didn't. 3. Voorhees Castle. Out in Piatt County stands a house that looks like it belongs in a storybook builder's regret. Turrets, steep roofs, and an air of having been important once. Voorhees Castle sits on a lane people still give directions to, as if keeping a story alive required repetition. There are versions of the house's tale, a love that soured, a child who died too soon, a family that left in a hurry, but everyone agrees on the tone, a persistent, domestic sorrow. Walkers tell of hearing a piano lift through open windows when the room is empty, of lullabies that stop at the threshold. Children dared each other to peek in the long curtained windows at dusk and report the sight of a rocking chair that moves for no one, like someone stands and sits in a slow private cycle. Friends of the last family to live there say the matriarch kept a habit of placing a fresh handkerchief on the guest room pillow each evening. After she died, neighbors found that handkerchiefs continued to appear, folded small and white, as if someone still made the bed. Voorhees Castle's oddness is domestic and tender, less an accusation than a ritual. It's a house that remembers how to be hospitable to an absent collection of people. People in the county treat it like an elderly neighbor, waved to, not pried into. It feels like being in the presence of someone who has not yet closed their hands on what they once held. 4. Munger Road. There's a stretch of Munger Road that curves near an old rail crossing and a gravel lot where teenagers used to pull over to confess dares. The legend here is practical and stubborn. A spectral bus, a woman in white, footsteps on the rails. The stories can sound like local variations on the same theme: longing, mistake, the clumsy edges where life spills into rumor. Drivers say that on certain nights, the air thickens over the track, and you feel for a moment like you've stepped into someone else's memory. 2 teenagers told the same tale years apart. They parked on a dare, lights off, and in the gloom, a school bus appeared out of nowhere at the other end of the lot. Its doors were closed. No one sat inside. When one boy reached for the bus, the brakes squealed as if in life. Then the bus vanished. Another time, a woman walking home swore she heard a child calling from the tracks, and when she went to help, there was only a scattering of baby powder on the ground, nothing else to explain the sound. Munger Road's legends are rite and rehearsal. They are stories told by people whose town squares are too small for big tragedies. 5. The Witch's Castle. Near Chicago's edge, among the oaks of a public park, lie curved stone walls and a ruin most visitors call the Witch's Castle. The name sounds theatrical, but the neighborhood keeps the story soft. In winter, the structure looks like a fossil of a grander age. In summer, teenagers leave palms of graffiti and coins in the hollows. The legend is simple. Once, long ago, an eccentric owner built an elaborate home whose courtyard gathered moonlight and rumor. After an untimely death, the house fell away and became a place where kids dared each other and couples pledged secrecy beneath ivy. Over time, stories accreted. People saw figures at windows that were only open air, heard voices when the park was empty, and left tokens for answers. An elderly couple who walk there every Sunday morning tell of a time they found a small circle of pebbles arranged like a child's careful ring and a little note, "Don't tell." They covered it with their own scarf and walked away. The Witch's Castle is not a site of terror so much as a place that received many small confidences. It's the kind of ruin that's best handled like a rumor. With curiosity but also discretion, people leave it alone because they know names can stick when you try to force them. Maybe these places aren't just haunted. Maybe they're holding on. A cemetery, a hospital, a house, a road, a ruin, each one remembering what people tried to forget. In Illinois, weirdness isn't loud. It waits, patient as an old neighbor watching the weather. So if you ever visit, don't go chasing proof, go quiet, listen. You might not find ghosts, but you might feel the echo of something that still matters, because here, stories don't die, they linger, and sometimes that's the closest we ever get to forever. What about you? If you could visit just one, which place would you dare to step into first?